So, last week I did a review of Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, basically to coincide with the 25th anniversary of its release in cinemas. And, it put me in the mood for the Star Wars prequels. I wanted to kind of watch the other two, because I haven't watched them for a couple of years, and I figured, let's rewatch the other two as well. So, today we're going to talk about Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, this one I think, even by the standards of the prequels, is often considered to be the weakest of them. This is the one I think most people kind of prefer either Episode 1 or Episode 3 to this one, or at least most people that I know, that I talk to about Star Wars, seem to prefer the other two. And for sure, for me, it is also the weakest of the prequels. I think it's the one that has the most problems. But overall, this is still a really fun movie for me. I do still enjoy this film in the way that I enjoy all of the prequels. This movie does have, I think, a lot of the same flaws that all of the prequels have. Namely, the kind of the dialogue is kind of bad and kind of cringe. And look, I realize I've heard that is sort of a deliberate thing. The bad dialogue, that it's supposed to kind of emulate, dialogue from like movie serials from the 40s, which was a big kind of influence on George Lucas, both here and also with Indiana Jones. And whether that's the case or not, it's still bad dialogue. Something being deliberately bad doesn't make it less bad. I still don't really like the dialogue for the most part here. It's something I put up with. It doesn't ruin the films for me, but it's something that I'm like, this is still a bit clunky and a bit weird, whether it's deliberately that way or not. The other thing that I think affects all three of these movies quite a lot is the acting is a little bit hit and miss. I think some of that is to do with the clunky dialogue. But yeah, there's some very odd performances in these movies, and also the CGI, which hasn't aged well and is probably a little bit overused. That's something that I think is true of all three of the prequels, and I think they are issues with the films, but they don't ruin the movies for me. I still like the films overall. Now, the one big thing about this particular movie that I don't really like, and the thing that makes it probably my least favorite of the three prequels, is the romance. I don't really like the romance between Anakin and Padme. I think it's quite badly done. I like the idea of the romance in concept, and especially the way that it's going to end up in Episode 3, with it being this kind of doomed, tragic romance, and it, coinciding with Anakin's, downfall and him being seduced by the dark side. I like all of that. You kind of need the romance in there, for that whole thing to work. That being said, those scenes to me are probably the most difficult to watch in this. Again, part of it is the dialogue. The dialogue, for the most part, isn't too bad. I can sort of put up with it, but the dialogue is at its worst and its most cringy in those scenes, in those romance scenes, I think. But also a big part of that is due to the chemistry between Anakin and Padme, or rather the lack thereof. I think Hayden Christensen gets a lot of shit for his acting in these movies. He is really, I think he's all right as Anakin Skywalker. I mean, I think what was great about the Obi-Wan miniseries that came out on Disney Plus was they kind of put him in that, and it really showed that no, he was good as Anakin / Vader. And I think in the next movie as well, he gets really great as Anakin. We'll get more onto him in a moment. And I think Natalie Portman is pretty consistently good throughout these movies as well. So I think both of them are good individually, but I think they don't really have much chemistry on screen with one another. I think the scenes where we just get Padme and Anakin, for me, they are some of the weaker scenes in the movies. I don't mind them as much when you got Obi-Wan there as well, because I think Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman are both quite good at bouncing off Ewan McGregor in those scenes. But when it's just the two of them, especially when they're doing the whole romance stuff, for me, that's just never gelled with me. That's always been one of my least favorite aspects of the movie. But there is still a lot to like in Attack of the Clones. I said this about Phantom Menace as well, and I think this is true of all the Star Wars prequels. I appreciate these movies a lot more as an adult, because I appreciate certain things that happen in the story more as an adult. Specifically, the kind of the political side of these movies. I really like Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine. I think he's really good, and I'm fascinated by the kind of the arc he goes on throughout these movies, where we see him kind of manipulate everyone politically behind the scenes. That to me is one of the more interesting aspects of the movies now that I watch them as an adult. And this movie is set like 10 years after Phantom Menace, and to see where, how he's kind of gotten this greater position of power, and see how he's still, kind of pulling all the strings politically is really interesting. I think he's a really interesting character. We see more of his kind of, darker sort of motivations in this movie as well. And with the political side as well, you've also got Count Dooku as the kind of the main antagonist of this one, played by the phenomenally good Christopher Lee. I always love Christopher Lee. He was such a great actor, just in everything he was in. And yeah, great to see him in this. He's great as Count Dooku. I really, really like him a lot. So yeah, that whole side of it is really interesting. And what I like about this movie is I love the fact that we have this kind of mystery plot going on. We've got, while Anakin and Padme are off doing their romance, which again, not the biggest fan of, Obi-Wan is off basically being a spy. He's, trying to uncover this mystery. He discovers the clone army and sort of, finds out these political secrets. It's basically a spy film, a mystery film, and I love that element of it. I think that's really well done. I think Ewan McGregor is great as Obi-Wan. He was always pretty phenomenal, but like he gets a lot more stuff to do in this one, obviously, than he did in Phantom Menace, and I think he really revels in his role. He's great in this movie, and he's really good with Hayden Christensen as well. And when they're having particularly in Act 1, when they're having their little bits of banter, I think that's really good. Obi-Wan's quite funny in this movie. He's quite dry and sarcastic, and I like that. I really like the bit in Act 1 where they're in the bar, and where Obi-Wan's at the bar, and the guy goes, "You want to buy some death sticks?" And he goes, "You don't want to sell me death sticks. I don't want to sell you death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life. I want to go home and rethink my life." That bit just always makes me laugh, man. I just really like that specific bit. And yeah, Obi-Wan has a lot of these little funny moments throughout. I really like that. Like when Padme and Anakin get captured, they go, "Yeah, we thought we'd come and rescue you. Ah, good job." I just like Obi-Wan is just great in this. I think Ewan McGregor and Ian McDiarmid are the two kind of consistently good parts of this movie. I think those two really kind of carry these movies a lot of the way. They're really good in this, especially Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. I think he's just phenomenal here. And while I don't really like the whole romance stuff with Padme, I do really like a lot of the little moments in Anakin's story where we see him kind of start to let his emotions get the better of him, start to turn his back on the Jedi, start to kind of question the Jedi and Obi-Wan and stuff like that. That's really interesting to me. He's bickering with Obi-Wan about how things should be done at the start, and then we have these other bits of emotions. Obviously, he's in love with Padme, which, yeah. But I think it all comes to a head with what I think is one of the most powerful and tragic scenes in this movie, and it's where he finds his mum. Of course, his mum's been captured by the Tuscans, and she dies in his arms. And look, the dialogue is a problem throughout this movie. It's not as bad here. I actually think that this is one of the more effective sort of emotional moments here. I really like the actor who played Anakin's mum in both these movies. I think she was really, really good. I always forget the lady's name, and I feel so bad for forgetting it, but I'll put it in the thing down here. But I'm really bad with remembering people's names. But I think she's really good. I like Hayden Christensen in this scene, and I think that also leads to one of my kind of main things about Hayden Christensen's performance in these movies. He is really good at sort of acting just sort of with his body and with his face in this. The dialogue is kind of, like I said, the dialogue is kind of, all over the place. Some of his delivery is a bit wooden, but when he's just got to cry or look angry or just show that kind of emotion on his face, he is really good in those scenes. When he's just acting with his face, when he's just acting with his body language, the bit where he's got his mum's body wrapped up in the blankets and he's going to, bury her. That's all face acting, and it's so good. That scene is so powerful, man. And the scene where his mum dies is really emotional. It actually does kind of get me a bit choked up seeing that sequence. I think that scene is great. One thing, actually, I've given the dialogue a hard time, but I think one line in this that I genuinely like is when Anakin's mum sees him for the first time in years, and she goes, "Oh, you're so handsome," and says it in that very kind of wholesome way that mums do, and it's just, it's it's such a heartbreaking scene, man. But I love it. It's really kind of the start of Anakin's descent into the dark side. You know, when he goes and he slaughters all the Tuscans, and actually that leads to what I think is probably the only scene between him and Padme alone that I actually like. And it's the bit, and again, the some people have criticised the performance here, but I think but I think it's all right. I actually like the scene. It's the bit where he says, that he killed all the Tuscans, and not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I love that scene. I don't know what it is. I don't think the performance is bad in that scene at all. I kind of like that bit. That's like really the only scene between Anakin and Padme where they're by themselves that I really like. But yeah, that kind of being the inciting incident to kind of start Anakin on this path down, sort of into the dark side, and sort of to the Sith. That's a really powerful thing. I like that whole sequence. But now we're going to talk about what is my absolute favorite part of this movie, the Battle of Geonosis. I love the Battle of Geonosis, where it starts with Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme all being captured and sentenced to death, to being executed by these monsters. The escape and all that's really good. Their escape and how they best the monsters is really good. And then it's when you see Mace Windu rock up with his awesome purple lightsaber. Mace Windu, by the way, one of the coolest characters. I love Mace Windu. I mean, he's Samuel L. Jackson, so of course that's going to help make him cool because Samuel L. Jackson is cool. But like, he's got the badass purple lightsaber. Or anyway, it's a bit where he points his lightsaber at Jango Fett, and then you see all the rest of the Jedi emerge to go and fight the droid army. Oh, it's so good. It gets me so pumped up to see that scene. I think the thing about the Battle of Geonosis is that while I think I appreciate the rest of this movie more as an adult, this is the part of the movie that fills me with that kind of childlike excitement that I think Star Wars does so well. I get so pumped up and so hyped up whenever the Battle of Geonosis starts, whenever the Jedi reveal themselves and all the the lightsabers come up, and we get the Jedi and the droids running towards each other, and they just all start fighting. It's so good. I don't even mind the bad comedy in this, because there is some bad comedy. It's where C-3PO and one of the droids get their heads swapped, and that leads to comedic shenanigans. I don't really like when they put these comedy bits in the big battle sequences, but I think it's less offensive here than it is in episode 1 with Jar Jar Binks. I think the stuff with Jar Jar in episode 1, that takes me out of the action sequences at certain points. Doesn't here with C-3PO. I think it's it's not quite as bad. I still don't like it being in there, but I don't think it's as bad. But the rest of the Battle of Geonosis is fantastic. You've got the great scene where it's, like I say, where it's the Jedi and the droids fighting, and then all hope seems lost. They're outnumbered, and we see Yoda show up with the clone army, with the clone troopers, and it just gets me so hype again. And I'm like, yes, I love this whole part. That whole third act of this movie is so good. The chase where they're chasing Count Dooku is fantastic as well. When we actually get Obi-Wan and Anakin against Count Dooku, and we see Count Dooku pull his lightsaber out, and he just fights like an absolute badass. He's got the lightning. He's got, he's just awesome. I love that part. And then when Yoda shows up, and Yoda and Dooku having the fight, one of my favorite clips I've ever seen on YouTube is from an interview with Christopher Lee, where someone asks him about Star Wars, and he says, "I did do the fight with Yoda. Wasn't easy, of course, because he wasn't there." I just love the way he says that. I just love, for some reason, that always makes me laugh anytime I watch him say that. It just wasn't easy because he wasn't there. But yeah, that whole scene with Yoda being a little green badass fighting Count Dooku, awesome. Love that. And then, we get all the stuff setting up episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. But yeah, Battle of Geonosis, easily my favorite part of this whole movie. Like I say, there's other stuff that really works. I like all the stuff with Obi-Wan, being a spy and trying to uncover this mystery and discovering the clone army and meeting Jango and Boba Fett. Those are really interesting scenes. That really intense scene where Jango Fett and Obi-Wan kind of meet and they're talking to each other. That's a really that has a little bit of tension to it. Those two actors are really good with each other. Again, the scene with Anakin's mum dying is, I think, really interesting. The stuff on Tatooine in general, really interesting stuff. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff I really like in here. Padme continues to be awesome in this. Padme is really good, holding her own in the, in the scenes on Geonosis. Really excellent. But yeah, it's that whole thing on Geonosis, the Battle of Geonosis, which honestly is one of my favorite battles in Star Wars. I always love it. It always keeps me entertained. It's one of my favorite scenes just in all of Star Wars. I love the Battle of Geonosis. But yeah, overall, Attack of the Clones, I really enjoyed watching this again last night. You know, it is my least favorite of the prequels, but that's more because I think the other two are really good rather than because I think this one is particularly bad. Mostly the reason this is my least favorite is, again, because of that romance stuff that I don't really like. I don't think it's very well done here. I'm not against romance in movies in general. I just don't think it's particularly well done here. But despite that, you've got you've got the big final act battle scenes. You've got the mystery element. You've got the beginnings of Anakin's kind of descent and his journey to the dark side. There's a lot of stuff to really, really like in Attack of the Clones, and I still enjoy it all these years later. But yeah, let me know what you think of Attack of the Clones down in the comments. Whatever your general thoughts are, drop them down there. We'll have a chat about it. Thanks for stopping by. That's basically all I've got for you. So yeah, see you when I see you. Bye.